This week's episode of the And She Looked Up podcast is brought to you by Fine Lime Designs. If the name sounds familiar, that's because it's my design business and the work I do there helps make this podcast possible. If you love colorful and whimsical art prints, greeting cards, and journaling stickers, then head over to my Etsy shop for a delightful browse. Just search for Fine Lime, like the fruit, designs, all one word, on Etsy, or click the link in the show notes. And now, on with this week's episode. Welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. Each week, we sit down with inspiring Canadian women who create for a living. We talk about their creative journeys and their best business tips, as well as the creative and business mindset issues all creative entrepreneurs struggle with. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and after leaving a 20-year career in corporate retail, I've been happily self-employed for 12 years. I'm a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a multi-six-figure-a-year entrepreneur in the digital content space. This podcast is for the artists, the makers, and the creatives who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I am your host, Melissa, and this week I am welcoming PR professional and food blogger Dee de los Santos to the podcast to talk about using your platform to do good. Welcome to the show, Dee.
Thanks for having me.
I am super excited to be talking to you about. This is something I'm actually really passionate about, and when I was thinking about this episode, I knew that you were the person to talk to. So.
Aw, such an honor. You've had such, some great guests in the past, and it's really cool to add my name to this list.
Well, I am really thrilled that you're here. For those of you who may not know Dee, she is, as I mentioned, a PR and digital marketing professional by day here in Vancouver, and she is a food blogger by night at gastrofork.ca. And if you are somebody who loves food in Vancouver, you have probably come across her blog at some point. She covers a lot of the restaurant and food scene here in the city. And she's been doing that for 11 years, which is a long time in the blogging world.
That's how long I've known you.
Yeah, I think that's around when we met.
Yeah.
She also sits on the BC Women's Hospital Foundation's Young Women Council as communication lead, and she is the Children's Heart Network of BC's event coordinator for their annual wine gala. And in recent years, Dee started the Heart Box project, which I know is a cause very dear to her heart. It's a growing initiative sending celebration boxes to children living with congenital heart defects. So she does a lot of things, and she really does leverage her platform to do good in the community for things that I know she is really passionate about. So we're going to be talking about that today. But before we get there, the first question I ask everybody who comes on the show, Dee, is, did you feel like you were creative as a kid?
Oh my gosh, let me tell you, I identified so much as a creative kid in so many different ways. I was awful at math. My math teacher hated me because I'd come to an answer but find another way to do it. And I preferred the arts like painting, drama. I loved music, and I think that kind of stems back to my family. There was always music playing in our place. We'd always go see musicals. So yeah, it was a good time being a kid.
And I think you have a sister who's a photographer as well.
Yes, she's the artist, the official artist in the family, because she went to Emily Carr, and she's a photographer, she's a graphic designer, she's a painter, she's everything.
So it's something that was really important to you all as a family growing up, which is cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your background. Like, what led you into PR? How did you get from being a kid who loved art and music to finding yourself as a PR professional?
Well, I think back to when I was in high school, there were two things that really excited me, being on student council and planning events. And the second one was a screenwriting course I was taking. And I think these passions just kind of pushed me towards public relations and marketing. I ended up taking a PR course at Langara, and then I went on to BCIT. Uh, and funnily, I was just reminiscing on how my career started recently, and this may make me sound super ancient, but but I started my career as an intern for the director of PR at Sutton Realty. I was faxing good news stories to press across Canada, and I was picking up a wired-in phone and doing cold calling, getting a lot of "don't waste my time" and no's. But in PR, it's usually 99% rejection, so I learned really fast.
What it's like to have somebody say no.
Yeah.
Yes, fax machines. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it's also very embarrassing.
Yeah. Heather Travis is a regular guest host on the show, and she is also in PR, and she talks about that quite frequently, how
Oh my
she had
goodness.
to go out for lunches and she had to mail things to people and fax things to people. So,
Yes, it was a very different time.
very different. And what led you to food? Like, how did you start Gastrofork?
You know what? I always tell people it's kind of like a two-prong approach. It was basically the biggest thing was I wanted to learn how to cook for my dad, and I wanted to share his recipes because everyone loves his food. Everyone always asks him to make food whenever we have parties. So there was that portion to it. And then I loved going out to eat, and a lot of my friends always asked me for recommendations. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I put it on a blog, they could go read about it because I feel like I'm a better writer than I am than a speaker.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how it started and how it grew.
Yeah, your dad has also been quite involved in your blog. I remember meeting him at
Yeah,
I think it was for the Vancouver Christmas market when they sort of debuted
right.
back in the,
Back
gosh,
in
that
the
was
day.
yeah, so long ago. But they did an event for food bloggers to come sample all the food that was going to be at the market, and I remember meeting your dad there for the first time. So
Yeah, he is obsessed with Christmas, and like it just made the most sense to bring him to the Christmas market because, he used to go to Germany when he was younger, and he was always telling me about Christmas markets. So I'm like, of course
oh,
you have.
that's so nice that you were able to do that with him. That's really cool. Yeah, and it's been 11 years now, which is, I was going to say, it does make you a dinosaur in the blogging world, but it really
It does.
does.
It really does. But it's kind of cool because, like, as you know, since you've been around just as long, or
Yeah.
if not longer, it's kind of this really cool progression to see how, at first it was just straight blogging, and now it's like Instagram, Twitter, and like all this other stuff. Now TikTok. So it's kind of fun to kind of watch how things have transitioned through the past 11
It
years.
has really evolved. I don't recognize it from today really that much at all compared to when I started, which I started blogging in 2003, but I didn't start food blogging until 2010, I think. So, yeah, it's just so completely different from
Yeah.
how it was back then. But over the course of that time, you have built up, you were able to build up a fairly strong following throughout the Vancouver area of people who just want to see where you're eating and what you're making. And you have started to use that platform to champion other things that are really important to you. And this is something I think a lot of bloggers don't necessarily realize that they can do. They don't necessarily see their platform in that way. But what was it that set you down the path of deciding that you were going to use your social media presence mainly to champion causes that were important to you?
Right. Well, I've always been passionate about women's and children's health. It's always been kind of part of my fundraising efforts. And I think, thinking back to 11 years ago, I think the first fundraiser I did with GastroFork was Bake for the Quake.
Oh, I did that too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know about Bake for the Quake, it was kind of we were raising funds for the earthquake that hit Indonesia,
Hmm.
and it was so nice to meet everyone because there
Yeah.
was kind of a nice segue of, you know, raising funds and then meeting the food community. But yeah, getting back to the path, I was briefly, but very briefly, studying women's rights and international law before I decided to get into marketing. Um, but everything kind of came to a grinding halt when I found out about my son Winston's diagnosis. I was absolutely gutted and felt very alone for a long time. But Thankfully, there were resources given to me by BC Women's and BC Children's to help me cope. And, I found an unexpected kindness and passion in the team that helped me in the last couple of months of my pregnancy and beyond. I loved, and I still love talking about food, small businesses, great events around the city, but I knew I couldn't be alone in what I was going through. And I wanted to share facts and figures or anything I could do to help others who might be in my kind of situation. I mean, even just having a conversation with my own mom made me realize that there is so much misinformation and even just a lack of information on women's health out there.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, your son Winston was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, I think before you gave birth, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a really good friend who also had a very similar experience. She was giving birth to twins, and one of the twins was born with a congenital heart defect. So she has been through very similar journey to yours, actually. And I know.
Is her name Jessica?
No, her name is Erica.
Okay, because I do know someone who's kind of similar. She has twins, and one of them has CHD heart.
Her twins are 16 now, so they're chugging along really.
That's good.
Yes. And she's based out of the U.S., so a little bit of a different situation with, their healthcare system is so very different.
I can't imagine.
Yes.
I'm so thankful for ours up here.
Yeah, so that really was what kind of, I think, as you said, triggered it for you. And you've been very open about the fact that you're a heart mom, and I know from you and from my friend that that's a very tight-knit community. But what was it that gave you the idea? Well, first of all, you created what you called the Heartbox Project, which is yeah. So maybe you could tell us first a little bit about what the actual heart boxes are.
Yeah, sure. So the heart box is kind of a celebration box that gets sent. It's a mix of things you need to decorate and throw a party. The prime reason why we send this is for kids to celebrate their heart anniversaries, which is a year or, an X amount of time since their last open heart surgery. Mm-hmm. And in the box itself, there's balloons, decorations, like paper plates, cups, that kind of stuff. We also put like an age-appropriate book and a small gift based on what the parents tell us that the kids like.
Okay, so it's not just really young kids getting this; it's really any child who has gone through an open heart surgery.
Yeah, we've had kids that are like maybe 17, 18, okay. But for the most part, most kids are like between 2 and 4.
Right. Okay. And what was it that gave you the idea for it in the first place? Because I think it has evolved a little bit since you started it initially.
Yes. So I guess I was thinking about this the other night, but I really enjoyed a lot of the Children's Heart Network programming, and it helped me get to know a couple of families. An example was their Christmas pancake breakfast, which they used to hold every year prior to COVID. That year we were late, and Winston was probably around 6 months at the time, and we snuck in and we asked this family if we could sit at their table. They were kind enough to let us, and I started talking to the mom, and I found out her son had the exact same diagnosis as Winston. It felt almost like serendipitous to meet her and her son, because at the time I felt so much anxiety about the future, and to see someone who was like 6, 7 years old just running around while all the other kids, it just helped me in a way that, I don't know, I could never really describe.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's just sometimes you just need that connection point with another human who gets
exactly.
it.
And yeah, I got really sad that everything had to shut down because of the pandemic, and there was really no way to connect with other heart families. So I came across this Vancouver Foundation grant that was focused on goodwill events, and I applied for it and I pitched my idea, to send this party box to kids living with CHD across BC and those staying at BC Children's Hospital, just to remind them how far they've come. And yeah, that's kind of how it evolved.
Oh, that's really nice. I like that whole idea. And I thought you had gotten a small grant to help you fund that initial launch. And this is something I'm hoping to do a bigger episode down the road on finding grant money and funding, because there's so many options out there that I think people aren't even aware exist.
Yes.
But this sounds like it was a local community grant that you got.
Yeah, so I approached the neighborhood small grants from Vancouver Foundation, and the neighborhood small grants provide up to $500 to launch your idea or project,
Okay.
and they've been so supportive. And they have little branches everywhere, so depending on where you live, they have kind of like a branch. And yeah, you just apply, and they're so kind. And at the end of the year, they have this party for you, and we just,
Oh,
celebrate each other's successes.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many of these. I know I've seen in my local community. I don't live in Vancouver. I'm just south of Vancouver, but the United Way does something very similar with $500 grants, like micro neighborhood grants to do something to improve your neighborhood. But there's also grant money at the provincial level and the
Hmm.
municipal and city level and the federal level, and there's a lot of money out there for these kinds of projects. Um, so,
Definitely.
do you still get some grant funding to keep the project going?
So I used their grant twice.
Okay.
They're very encouraging. I could have applied again,
Mhm.
but currently most of our funding comes from the Children's Heart Network of BC and private donations.
Oh, okay. So that's cool. How did the Children's Heart Network get involved? Because that's something I wouldn't have even thought to connect the dots, but it makes sense now. How did you get them involved? Did they see what you were doing and think this is really great, or did you go directly to them?
Well, it was kind of this thing where I've always wanted to kind of participate in the Children's Heart Network of BC, so I've been volunteering a lot with them. So, I was pitching ideas for their newsletter. I was helping secure sponsorship for their wine gala in the last couple years, and all of that. And I kind of maintained a really good relationship with the provincial coordinator here. Her name is Sam. And when I was doing the project, I had the Children's Heart Network in mind. And I told myself, I'm like, if I can show them the good that this project is bringing to other heart kids, especially during the pandemic when it's impossible for all of us to meet up together, maybe they would be interested in at least sponsoring kind of just the basic costs of the box.
Right.
And and so I started the Heartbox project in July of 2020, and I took the grant money from Vancouver Foundation between then and December. And then December, I like sat down and I made this little presentation for them, and I was like, this is how many boxes we sent. This is, all the kids, because a lot of the parents were taking pictures and sending it to me, and
Right.
it was very sweet and very kind of them to do that. And so I was sharing it to them, and I said, hey, would you guys be interested in, maybe partnering on this, or maybe just taking it on and then I can manage it. And they were so supportive. They were like 100% yes. So this is our second year with the Children's Heart Network, funding our boxes.
Awesome. I'm going to guess that your background in PR has helped you, particularly with presenting and pitching.
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
but I'm also wondering if your food blogging platform, because I know you have multiple Instagram accounts that kind of keep all these things separate,
Mhm.
but has your background as a food blogger or your community as a food blogger helped you bring others into the project at all?
Yes and no. I mean, I obviously like, being in the food scene for so long and kind of being wearing multiple hats of being a PR person plus also being a food blogger. Um, you get to know a lot of small companies or small
Mm-hmm.
businesses, chefs, and those types. And it's kind of this thing where it's a symbiotic relationship. Like if they needed something from me, then obviously I would be more than happy to help. And it's kind of this thing where I didn't feel odd to ask them for
Right.
help. And I'm very thankful for that kind of relationships with so many, well, not so many, but with different types of businesses.
I think that's something we often sort of forget is how important those relationships can be. Maybe not in the moment that we're creating them, but down the road, it's like I even just thinking about this podcast, so many of the people I've been able to bring on as guests are people that I have had the opportunity to forge some kind of relationship with in the past, never
Hmm.
ever thinking I would have a podcast, but it helps, and I mean, PR is a relationship business really at its heart, I would say.
Definitely. And I mean, the majority of the initial donations from businesses were kind of ones I didn't have a connection to. So if people out there are thinking about starting up their own thing, for me personally, it was just something where I loved, a particular product, and I
Mm-hmm.
was excited to tell them about what I was doing. So I think if you just came across as genuine in your ask, people will listen
Yeah,
and people will support you.
I think that's very, very true. Where are you at with the project now? Because I know you started out with just a handful of boxes. You were kind of testing it out, see how it did. But how many kids are you able to send your boxes out to at this point?
So last year we sent, I believe it was 46 to 48 boxes,
Okay.
and it's been kind of the same trend this year. Um, and it's just been crazy because initially when I started with the grant, I had to put a set amount. So I was like, okay, 10 boxes.
Right.
And then the second time we had the grant, it was another 10 boxes. And now it's grown. It's blown up.
Yeah.
So
I mean, in a way, I suppose you don't want it to grow too much, but um, still, 48 is quite a lot of families going through something that's that has a huge impact on their lives. So,
yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
to be able to help that many people in a year is really must make you feel really good.
Yeah, I mean that, and also like everyone who's donated, like you've donated your lovely stickers and a whole bunch of other places. Like it,
Hmm.
it just it makes me happy to also connect people,
Yeah.
to do all this goodwill as well.
Do you have help with it now? Or is it you that's doing all the work, like the reaching out, collecting the product, packing, shipping, or do you have somebody who helps you out?
Well, when I first started back in 2020, it was just me doing everything, sponsorship,
Yeah.
gifting, emailing, much like any small business, of course. Of course, I was thankful to have my sister Natalie help me with graphics because that's not really my forte. I'm a good Canva person. Other than that, not so great.
Canva has made life easy for so many people.
It has, but I really respect all the graphic designers because their job is not easy and people think that it is, but it's not.
Thank you.
Um, but yeah, late last year I had a dear friend of mine, Megan Sinnott. She joined me and she's super organized. She helped me kind of tighten the processes, redesigned our look recently, and in December of every year we put together cardiac intensive care unit boxes. So she really helped me put that together and rein it all in.
Oh, okay. What are the
Yeah.
cardiac intensive care unit boxes? What goes into that?
So basic, it's kind of the same. We do about 10 boxes,
Hmm.
and they go into the cardiac intensive care unit at BC Children's, and it's kind of more holiday themed. So there's like a stocking, and there's like cookies and treats, and a whole bunch of activity boards, and there's pajamas, like a whole bunch of stuff because we just kind of try to make it bigger than the normal hard box.
Right. And
So
it's for those kids that are in the hospital over the holidays kind of thing?
yes.
Okay. That's nice.
Yeah.
um, where are you hoping to see this go? Because it's grown a lot in just 2 years. And are you hoping to do? You just mentioned that you've created a second type of box. Are you hoping to do more with it in the coming year?
Yeah, I mean, currently I would really like to expand this project across Canada.
Hmm.
We've had a lot of requests come in from other provinces, but we just haven't had the means to send boxes outside of BC.
Right.
The last couple of months have been a time to reflect on how we can continue getting donations on a more steady basis. So maybe one day we can go Canada wide and maybe eventually worldwide, who knows?
That would be cool.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. And you also mentioned in your bio, which I didn't know, that you are going to be helping the Children's Heart Network as their event coordinator for their annual wine gala. So did that come out of this or your previous volunteer work with them?
Yes, I've been very busy.
Yes, you have.
Um, it's kind of a mix of both. I think it's just, like I said, the relationship that I had originally just started off with volunteering, didn't really expect anything out of it. And then working closely with the Heartbox project with them. Um, and them kind of knowing my background had helped a lot.
Right.
And yeah, it was kind of just this thing that kind of grew organically. It was, the present event coordinator, she's leaving, so they were trying to find someone rather than kind of put the general call out. So yeah, they reached out to me, and I was so excited because I've always really wanted to participate in all the things that they do. So it's a nice natural progression.
Yeah, it's a good fit for you. Now you were also involved with the BC Women's, this is a long mouthful for
I
me
know.
to say, the BC Women's Young Women's Council. So BC Women's, we're talking about BC Women's Hospital
Yeah.
here in Vancouver with their Young Women's Council. And you mentioned that you are their communications lead. And can you tell us a little bit about what the Young Women's Council is, first of all, and what it is that you do with them? Because it's a really interesting project.
Yeah, so we provide support to the BC Women's Health Foundation in spreading the word of their current campaigns to women in like our age bracket and younger. Sometimes I'm curious as to why I'm still part of this because I don't consider myself a young woman, but that's fine.
You look young, if that helps.
Uh, I'm going to be aged out eventually. But yeah, I've also been trying to champion bringing on more diverse wellness experts, and trying to, kind of bulk up the Asian representation through, informative interviews via our newsletter and, through our events.
Yeah, that's really an interesting program that they've got. I was checking out their Instagram feed the other night, and they're doing some really, really innovative and interesting things there that I don't really see a lot of other hospitals in the area doing so much. So I kind of thought that was very cool.
Yeah, and you know what? I learned so much every single time that I
Yeah.
showed up for things. It's just, you know, being a woman, of course, there's a lot of things that, you kind of put aside. You're just like, oh, maybe it's just period pain or whatever, but
Hmm.
it could be a lot more. And it's kind of made me more aware of my health and also people around me. And, you know, that's the great thing about being part of the council is that I get to learn something and I get to share it with other people because maybe they're suffering and they had no idea that they have endometriosis or,
Yeah,
you know,
that is so, so true. And we don't talk about women's health very much at
no,
all. It just, I don't know why. We're more than half the population, but for some
exactly.
reason, it just doesn't get talked about. And I went through some stuff in 2017 and I had to have a little bit of minor surgery. And it was just like mentioning it to my I thought I was the only person who had ever gone through this, but when I
Yeah.
mentioned it to a few friends, like I was shocked how many others were going through something similar, and we just don't talk about it. Like,
I know, and it's bizarre
it is.
because, you know, one, I don't remember the specific stat, but one stat that really shocked me recently that they have said uh, via BC Women's Health Foundation is that in a lot of the studies, if not almost all the studies, women are not being, studied. It's
Yes.
mostly like white men.
Yeah.
There's obviously not that many people of color that's being kind of remarked in the studies, and also women. I think I don't want to say the wrong percentage, but I feel like it's less
Yes.
than 5% of women being represented in these studies,
That
and
honestly
that's
wouldn't
shocking.
surprise me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so strange. My mom was a physician. Well, she's retired now. She's still alive, but she's
Hmm.
retired. And I remember this was like the 70s. So she was there weren't a lot of female physicians in the 70s, but I remember in our neighborhood when I was like 5 or 6, like so many of the women would come to our house to talk to my mom because there was very few female doctors and there was
Hmm.
very few people to talk to who would like understand it. And I didn't pick up on it until I was much older, like what was actually going on. Like these women just needed somebody to talk to who
Yeah.
understood what it was like to be a woman.
Definitely, and also someone who yeah, 100%, what it's like to be a woman, but also someone who believes,
Yes.
the
That
pain that you're in, because there's so many instances also where doctors are like, you probably aren't in that much pain. Here's a Tylenol, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly, exactly. So I think that's a really great initiative that they are putting out there, especially going for younger women who just maybe not aware of how to, or like how to. I think when you're younger, you tend to, what's the word I'm looking for here? You tend to grin and bear it, I guess, or maybe you don't think that you're not as confident standing up for yourself, advocating for yourself. That's the word I'm looking for.
Definitely.
Yeah, being an advocate for yourself. And so you sort of just allow yourself to be pushed
Exactly.
back. And
Exactly.
yes, I'm not being super articulate about this, but yeah, so I think that's a really great initiative that they're doing there. So
Yeah.
how do we as creatives and artists and makers and photographers and designers go about using our platforms to champion the causes we're really dialed into or that we're really passionate about? Because I think most of us as creatives do tend to have very strong feelings about specific causes that are dear to our hearts, but we just don't know how to go about it. And there can be so many reasons. Like we're afraid that we're going to seem preachy, or that it's going to be like a sales tactic, like or that we're going to get pushback, or we want to keep it private. There's so many reasons why we sort of don't want to go that route. But if you really think about it, we all have like these great platforms and people who are so connected to what we do, who would be very happy to support us and the things that we're passionate about. So as a PR professional, how would you suggest that, or how would you encourage them to reconsider going beyond just maybe writing a check at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's true, and it really is up to your own comfort level, of course. I mean, for a long time, I struggled with posting about wellness or anything other than food on my own platforms because, I too was afraid about, what people thought and if I would lose followers.
Yeah.
But as you grow older, I feel like you grow less concerned about that.
Yes, you don't care.
Exactly. And I think what people want nowadays on socials is a real connection. Let's be real, our market, particularly the food scene, is oversaturated. There are so many wonderful accounts that have, beautiful photos of beautiful food. But I feel in order to grow both personally and, if it really matters to you, your following, you have to let people you have to let people into your world and get to know who you are up to a point, of course, where you're comfortable. And I think many influencers and bloggers are aware of this. But from the other side of the coin, as a PR person, I feel like it also gives me leverage in my relationships with bloggers because if, say, I had a client that wants to talk about mental health or wellness, it's another avenue to explore with people who I know are open to talking about that in an authentic way with their audience.
Yes, but you're absolutely right there with it's a really interesting thing to kind of watch, is that we all kind of get really stuck, I guess, in our own heads, and we don't want to push people away. But you're totally right. It's another way to forge a relationship, and it's not necessarily about growing your followers. Like, I don't think any of us necessarily do it for that reason alone.
Exactly.
I hope not anyway.
Yeah.
You do want to be passionate about what it is that you're talking about, but I know when I owned Food Bloggers of Canada with my business partner Ethan, we knew we had an opportunity to give back, and we really struggled trying to find the right organization to work with because we didn't just want to write a check. Like, that was not what we wanted to do. We wanted to be involved in some kind of meaningful way besides just handing over money at the end of the year. And we really had to sit down and think about how we wanted to go about doing that. And if you sit down and think about it, there's so many different ways you can become involved. And you've done this through multiple avenues. You've created an actual program that gives something out. You are also volunteering, sitting on a council. You are giving your time. So you've done this through multiple ways. And I think that's something that's important for people to realize, is that there are very different concrete ways that you can give back and feel like it's a good fit for you.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be that involved.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many other like small ways to use our platform, right? Like for the most part, it's so easy to get started, even just liking or commenting on like a cause or a post about a cause or sharing it to your stories,
Mm-hmm.
because you're helping those accounts gain more traction, right?
Yes.
Um, but yeah, just yeah, if you got the time and energy, yeah, I'd say go for it. Volunteer as much as you can for the charity or nonprofit or whatever you feel most aligned with, and see if there's any way you can leverage your following or volunteer your skills to help them spread the word. And as I had mentioned previously, that's kind of what happened with the Children's Heart Network. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so glad to be where we are in, in our relationship, and also, being able to join them now.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a couple things there. One, you can, and this is one that I have done, is offering your services pro bono to people who might not necessarily be able to use them. And in something like PR, I would think that's a very valuable service that a lot
Mm-hmm.
of organizations could use. But it could be as simple as maybe running some workshops for kids, teaching them how to make a craft or learn how to paint. Or I'm trying to think of it from a creative's perspective, or
Mm-hmm.
as a graphic designer, I have done pro bono work for companies or charities or organizations who need help with logos or some branding materials. If you are an influencer, you have a platform that can be used to help magnify a message, and get it out to more people. So, and none of those necessarily have to take up a ton of your time.
Exactly. And nonprofits and charities, they're always so happy to have people
Mm-hmm.
volunteer because most often they're always understaffed.
Yes, and under budgeted.
Yes.
So they do have a budget, and that's important to know, but it's not usually the type of budget that you may be used to
Hmm.
working with. And so if you're in a position to be able to offer up pro bono services, that can really allow them to use that money that they might have spent on you in another way that has more meaning, or that brings more immediate relief to people that they're working with. So, yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can get involved. And Heather and I were talking about this a few weeks ago. We were talking about it from the sense of a newsletter, like what to send out to your newsletter readers and things, and how important it is that if you do some kind of fundraiser or activity or something to help raise funds, it's really important to let your audience know what you raised, and as a result of them helping you, so that they know, so that there's a level of transparency through the whole relationship.
Exactly.
Yes. And that's something you really want to do if you're getting involved in, particularly from a fundraising perspective. You really want to be transparent with where the money's going and that it got to the place it was supposed to go to. So that's really important. So we talked a little bit about this earlier on in the recording, but how important are relationships in bringing our giving back projects to life? And how you've talked a little bit about how you were able to use some of your relationships, but how are some ways that we can get a little bit of extra help if we need it to get our ideas off the ground, particularly like with you, where you wanted to launch an actual program? I mean, you started very small, but what what are some ways that we can look to get a little extra help with that?
Yeah, so I guess speaking from my own experience, I know how difficult it is to ask for support and, dare I say, money. Growing up, it was always looked down upon to ask for help or, ask for money.
Mm-hmm.
But, but to those who kind of feel that way currently, know that, your group of friends, followers, family, no matter how big or how small that is, they're your biggest supporters and your cheerleaders. I would say utilize your relationships in a genuine way, like I had mentioned earlier, where, if you can help them, and it'll help you open more doors for yourself. And a lot of the times I have to keep telling myself this. It's absolutely okay to accept a donation, and remember that it is the support and encouragement to help propel your project forward. To find some help in getting ideas off the ground, I would say talk to other people. talk to people starting businesses, their own projects, look up similar concepts on social media or online and see how they're growing their business. Even just putting a broad call out to your friends or your network will get you answers. Like put that Instagram algorithm to work for you because, once you start doing research, things are going to pop up in your feed. And honestly, that's how I found the Vancouver Foundation grant.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it helps in a way, I guess, the algorithm.
Yeah, definitely. And I contributed to your first round of heart boxes, and that is exactly how it happened. It happened on Instagram. I saw you talking about it, and that's something that's important to me as well. So I just sent you a message and said I'd like to help. Like, it's surprising who will come out of the woodwork when you put the message out there.
Exactly. I was, like I had mentioned earlier, like a lot of the first initial donations were, people I knew but didn't know very, very well. And I was just shocked at how generous all of you were when I first started the project. And, I'm still at awe at the things that we get and the things that are donated every day. So
this is the thing where I think it's important to show a little bit of who you are to your followers, to your customers, to people who love what you do, because it really does make you a person. And then when you do get into these situations where you would like to ask for help, people feel like they're helping a real human being. And I think sometimes we tend to think of Instagrammers and stuff as maybe not real. I don't know.
yeah,
They're so curated, I guess.
it's true. It's true. But yeah, I feel like maybe because I'm a little bit older, I just feel like the people I identify with when I scroll through my Instagram feed are the ones who are more honest and not more honest, but more open.
Yes,
I suppose
absolutely.
is the better word.
Yeah. And I don't think it means that you have to bare your entire soul to the world unless you want to. I mean, that's fine, but you can still balance your privacy with being open to a certain extent, and letting people in. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about that when I was going through your bio that you sent back in is that you have I never know how to say that. Is it Ko-fi or coffee or You have a coffee link.
I think it's a coffee. I don't know.
Yes. It is KO-FI for those of you out there who are listening. And you have one for the Heartbox project, and I was wondering because we've talked a lot about platforms like Patreon and Coffee, and there's a few others out there, and I was wondering what triggered you to start that and how that's going for you.
I was kind of originally thinking about starting is it Patreon? Patreon?
Patreon. I really talk about Ko-fi.
Yeah. I was originally going to start on that platform, but the way that it was kind of set up didn't really make sense for the Heartbox project because as much as we wanted donations to come in every month, it was just really hard to package because it's just like, what can we give people who are donating? And so we found that coffee was a lot easier to just, even make a $2 donation, or even it does have the capability, obviously, to set up monthly donations as well. But it's been easier, I find, to use because I've dabbled with Patreon before, but I find that it's a lot more direct and cleaner.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think because it allows you to do like a one-time donation, I think, doesn't it? So sort of like, okay, I have an extra $50. I'd love to give you. And I think too, maybe with a charitable cause, I sometimes feel like if you give too much, this is going to sound so weird, but if you give too much back to the people donating, they kind of get an idea that maybe the money's not going to the right thing. It's going to the rewards rather than the actual cause. So so I think it's interesting that you're doing it through coffee. I think that's probably a better way to go.
I mean, we looked into other platforms as well, like GoFundMe and that, but I felt like also, and maybe you can tell me because it sounds like you're more well versed in these things, but it sounded to me like Ko-fi it would take less money from the donation than other platforms do.
Oh, that's very possible. They all have their own fees, and I think particularly if you're doing something where you want the bulk of the money to go to helping, You really want to investigate as many platforms as you can. Yeah, so you are doing a lot. I was going to ask you if you had any other projects on the horizon, but you've got more on your list than I even knew you were doing. So I'm almost afraid to ask. But yeah, do you have anything else on the horizon or in the back of your head that you'd like to get involved with?
Not at this particular moment. Like you said, I'm a little full up on my cup, but I am trying to slow down a little bit this year just because Winston's going for heart surgery in May. So I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off and kind of just, trying to hang out with him afterwards and make sure everything's okay. So I think the problem is with, not the problem, but I feel like a lot of people, and I'm guilty for it, is we're all like go, 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 right? But we need to find that balance. And I've been trying in the last couple of years to really find the balance of relaxing, taking time for myself, taking time for my family, and having all these great things that I do on the side as well.
Yes, you do a lot, and you give back a lot, which is just fantastic. And you have a really cute, adorable little dude. We were just talking before we started recording that he is 4, isn't he?
He's turning 4 in June.
Okay, so he's coming up on 4, and he's just such a little man now.
He is, with a little attitude. So it's so bizarre to kind of see like a little baby become sentient. So
yes. All right. Well, before we wrap up, Dee, where can people find you online, both you and Gastrofork, and the projects that you are involved with?
Sure. Wow. Where to begin? I'm mostly on Instagram. You can find me at Deedles, Deedls. For Gastrofork, we keep it separate, so it's just Gastrofork on Instagram. That's also the handles for Twitter, if you guys are still on Twitter. I don't know. It's kind of this thing that I know Twitter's kind of on its way out.
I don't know. Lately, it's kind of ramped back up, I guess, with all the news. I find it more of
a news outlet.
A news outlet, right?
Yeah, definitely the same. And then the Heartbox project, of course, is heartboxproject.com, and Gastrofork is gastrofork.ca. And I think that's it. I'm on TikTok, but I'm not really doing much there. I'm just testing the waters because I feel like I'm kind of, again, aging out of that platform.
Although it might be good for the Heartbox people, the kids that are involved. Yes. But we will put show notes to we will put links to all of this in the show notes so that if you're interested in checking Dee out and the things that she does, or if any of the causes that we've mentioned today speak to you, you'll be able to find them you'll be able to find them in the show notes, both on the podcast listing and on the website at andshелookedup.com. Yeah, is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up? Or
no, I mean, thank you for having me. I had so much fun talking about all of this and kind of reminiscing on our past together.
Yes, I know. I was thinking about it as I was prepping. I was like, wow, that was a lot. The Christmas market is the one I really remember because I really enjoyed that, and I just thought it was so cool that you brought your dad.
I know, it was very unpopular because I was bringing him to a lot of other things, and people are like, "Why are you bringing your dad?"
I don't think it's unpopular. I thought it was really sweet, and he was so excited to be there. So I hope he's doing well.
Yes, he is. He's still trying to. Actually, my sister, because she's better at TikTok than I am, she's been trying to record my dad for our TikTok, or the Gastrofork TikTok. So there might be a couple of videos that come out with him.
Oh, that would be great. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in here this week to talk about how we can all do a better job at using our platforms to give back, because I think many of us out there would really like to do more, but we're just not necessarily sure how to go about it, or get over that initial discomfort. So yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that is it for this week. I will be back next week with another brand new episode, and we will talk to you all then. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshelookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshelookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.